Toward the end of last year, it really seemed like social justice, cancel culture stuff was winding down. And then the coronavirus pandemic happened and it seemed like it was over. I said conservatives are winning. Whatever that means, the right is winning. And now it seems like it's all come back tenfold. Maybe all that really happened was social justice got jammed up in the pipeline because of the coronavirus. And now that the virus is subsiding or whatever is happening, I don't know, it's bursting out of the pipes ridiculously fast. Take a look at this. One of the most insane stories I've ever seen from the Washington Post. Shut down all police movies and TV shows now. I am not optimistic about the next few months. I think the rapid decay and collapse is going to affect everybody. And you joke about civil war, man. Like people saying it's not going to happen. Nah, I think it's going to happen. I really do. I think we're in it. And I think right now there's a battle for the hearts and the minds of the individuals. It's called forming ranks. Which side are you on? They've been chanting it for 10 years or longer. They've been making propaganda videos. Which side are you on? We have movies about police. Why? Because police are heroes. They are. Not all of them, but in movies, at least in popular culture. Now they're not. Apparently at I think it was Dallas, they took down a statue of a Texas Ranger. It's just a Texas, not a person, just the Ranger himself. Just a law enforcement officer. Why? Racist. First, they started tearing down statues of the Confederacy. And I understand. My recommendation is to replace it with a plaque saying there once stood here this, and for this reason it was removed. No. They're talking about disposing of these statues. Those who forget their past are doomed to repeat it. This is some kind of strange culture revolution taking place. Twitter is censoring more and more. YouTube is censoring. Facebook is censoring. It's getting worse. No one knows who's going to win. I think Mark Zuckerberg is trying to hedge his bets. When it looked like the right was winning, Zuckerberg came out and said, free speech. Then when these massive Black Lives Matter protests emerged and all the companies fell in line posting these memes, Facebook now says, maybe we will reconsider because Facebook employees are revolting. And now the Washington Post says we got to shut down police movies and TV shows. You know why? Because they're pro-police propaganda. Let's read it. Like many other industries, entertainment companies have issued statements of support for the protests against racism and police brutality now filling America's streets. But there's something Hollywood can do to put its money where its social media posts are. Immediately halt production on cop shows and movies and rethink stories it tells about policing in America. For a century, Hollywood has been collaborating with police departments, telling stories that whitewash police shootings and valorizing an action hero style of policing over the harder, less dramatic work of building relationships with the communities cops are meant to serve and protect. There's a reason for that beyond a reactionary streak, hiding below the industry's surface liberalism. Purely from a dramatic perspective. Crime makes a story seem consequential. Investigating crime generates action, and solving crime provides for a morally and emotionally satisfying conclusion. Let me tell you something. Do you know why cop movies sell? Why Fast and the Furious, which is like a rogue cop kind of story, sells? Because cops are the good guys, and the bad guys are outside of the law. And regular Americans like the police. And 90% of Americans, including Americans of all minority races, believe that we should not reduce the amount of police we have serving our communities. And about a third think we should increase that number. There may be a light here. Although we're seeing the rise of fringe ideology, and it's expanding rapidly, it may actually be that they have lulled themselves into a false sense of security, which results in them outing themselves too early and then totally collapsing. It works kind of like a bacterial infection or a virus that slowly starts reproducing inside your body. And then once they have critical mass, they turn on the switch and start attacking cells to reproduce faster and faster and faster, alerting your body of the infection. That's kind of like what's happening. But maybe because of the media, they have convinced themselves they have more power than they really do. And because of that, people may react negatively and see a Donald Trump. Perhaps it's one of the reasons why Donald Trump got elected in the first place, and perhaps it's a reason why he may get reelected. They're attacking too soon. We can see the virus expanding, and we can resist it and win. The scary thing, though, is we may lose in certain areas. It's not over. This fight isn't necessarily for one side or the other, and that's just speculation. For all I know, they could have already dominated a lot of institutions, sitting in wait, and we don't know. They could be in every branch of the government. We don't know. I mean, we can clearly see them in the House, for sure. Let's read a little bit more. The result is an addiction to stories that portray police departments as more effective than they actually are, crime as more prevalent than it actually is, and police use of force as consistently justified. There are always gaps between reality and fiction. But given what policing in America has too often become, Hollywood's version of it looks less like fantasy and more like complicity. You know, they've called for banning Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the comedy show with Andy Samberg and Terry Crews, among other people, because they call it pro-cop propaganda. It depicts cops either as bumbling, silly fools or friendly neighborhood cops. And the funny thing is, the cops are people, man. They read the news. They're on YouTube. They're buying pizza at the local shop. You just don't realize it when they're walking next to you wearing street clothes because they're not in uniform. So when you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine and you see silly office shenanigans, yeah, it's because they probably do have silly office shenanigans. Now, there's a serious problem as our cultural institutions decay. Do we have problems with cops? You betcha. We need police accountability, and I think police reform makes a lot of sense. DeRay McKesson is a Black Lives Matter activist, and he's being condemned right now for saying things like cops shouldn't choke people. And I'm like, I think that's a fine reform. I think there are other ways police can restrain people, but the activists want more. They want to abolish the police, and they're going to start by getting rid of pro-police propaganda. Right now, there's a major movement literally calling for the abolition of police. And you've got Minneapolis contemplating disbanding their police. This is what I talked about in the previous segment. And I'll read it very quickly as we read this to give you an understanding of why they're calling for this stuff. If there are no police and we switch to community policing, what happens when a mob in your community comes to your house and yells off with their head? Who will you call? The police are supposed to be neutral arbiters to uphold the law, and justice is blind. They're supposed to treat everyone fairly and equally and not play biases. Without a police department, which does have its problems and cronyism exists, and they do favor, their friends and family. I get it. What's the alternative? No cops? So a mob shows up to your house and they say, we're the community watch and you're under arrest. For what? Shut up. You're a bigot. That's why. Why would they have to adhere to any special laws? Who's going to stop them? There's no cops. And therein lies the scary problem. Look, man, I'm not saying cops are perfect, but calling for the banning, shutting down of cop movies, now we're getting scary. This is where they start creating movies where the cops are inherently evil. They want young kids to grow up viewing the police as evil. But ultimately, what does this accomplish and where do we end up as a nation? There's not going to be some peaceful revolution. There's not going to be some beautiful overturning of the rule of law where all these activists can hold hands under a rainbow. When the police departments fall and chaos ensues, we get invaded by a foreign adversary. The federal government collapses. China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela start sweeping over and controlling territory and taking over. With the fall of the federal government and a lack of cohesion for law enforcement across this country, infiltrators can strike. And I'm talking about legit infiltrators. I'm curious as to all of this. I wonder if anything if this actually has anything to do with police brutality or otherwise, or if what we're actually seeing is foreign influence and subversion to destroy the United States from the inside out. And maybe. Some people have posted saying that this is the remnants of the Soviet Union. The attacks the seeds they planted in the 50s, and even after they've long since fallen, have now begun infecting the rest of our culture and spread. And this disease is getting worse to the point where it might be terminal. It might not be curable. I was looking at the New York Times. The New York Times is in civil war right now. It really is. 160 employees revolting, demanding they not allow an op-ed from a conservative politician. To me, it's crazy that the New York Times came to this point. But they were welcoming in their own enemies who are now surrounding them from the inside. So think about this. The New York Times may be destroyed. And it's because they were infiltrated. And now these people are demanding changes to what journalism is supposed to be. The New York Times has the opportunity to sever all of these people and save themselves. They won't do it because they're weak and they're scared. They should, though. The New York Times should terminate each and every one of these people who is revolting against what the company is supposed to be. But they won't because they're scared, because they don't want to be bigots, and because of the rioting. So what are they going to do? They will empower these insane people. And you know what the first thing these people will do? They'll say things like, from now on, we will never cover a story that makes cops look good no matter what. From now on, every story we write must be anti-cop. That way they can get rid of the actual constitutional, law enforcement we have, for all of its problems. I get it, man. I'm critical of them too. But they operate under the Constitution. They're supposed to. They're going to replace it with something else. Ideological policing, social justice policing. They're going to say, you can't protest, you can't go outside, right? They told us we couldn't go out and protest the shutdown, but then they said you can go out and protest for Black Lives Matter. Make no mistake about what's happening. The government has explicitly said, you can't protest. You can. The Constitution forbids this. Why is it happening? That I can't tell you. I can only tell you that it looks like it's going to get worse. I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. Next segment will be tomorrow at 10 a.m., and I'll see you all then.